Welcome everyone to the McGraw-Hill Summit, Virtual Operations Management, Innovative Ideas for Teaching, Operations, and Supply Chain in a Digital Age. We are excited to have you here today. And your hosts today are myself, Harper Christopher, the McGraw-Hill Operations and Decision Sciences team. I'm Harper Christopher, the Executive Marketing Manager, and Eric Weber is brand new to the team. He's our new Portfolio Manager. And Eric, if you want to say hello.
Yeah, good morning. Excited about all that we're going to be engaging with today. I know we've got some great panelists, great speakers, great events, and big shout out to you, Harper, for pulling us all together and let us working hard together. Thanks.
Thanks so much. I am excited about today. Oh, whoop, hold on. Okay, so a few quick housekeeping notes just so that everyone is aware. All participants will be on mute. You can use the chat or the Q&A and type any questions for the presenters, and Eric and I will be monitoring throughout the day to make sure that we are answering all of your questions. If there are any questions, if we sort of move along and there are any questions that are unanswered, we will do a frequently asked questions after the event and make sure that everything is answered. If you need to leave throughout the day, I know this is a long day from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. Eastern time. If you need to leave throughout the day for any of the sessions and return, you can just use that original access link to do so. And if you're having any technical difficulties, please let us know via Q&A or chat. And I am recording this event because we will be providing session videos after the event that give you access to just each session separately. So with that said, let's talk about the operations management agenda today. So we're going to start out, I'm obviously going to start out with some opening remarks that I'm doing now. We're going to talk with a panel of your peers, faculty from around the country, and they're going to talk about their success teaching OM and supply chain management. We are going to, at 11:15, go into a session on the operations and supply chain management relevance explosion as a result of COVID-19 with Bob Jacobs, and he's going to talk about how to engage your students. At 12:15, Gerard Cachan will be doing a session on how to make operations management interactive in the classroom. We're going to have a nice lunch break. Notice that there are breaks between every session so you can catch up on email or anything that you need to do and then come back for the session. We will have a lunch break from 1 to 1:30. And then at 1:30, James Abbey will be presenting our simulation game practice operations management and how he uses that at Texas A&M and how to motivate students with gaming. Through operations management. So that'll be an exciting session. At 2:15, we'll be talking about building relevance into the OM course, a case-based approach with the Schroeder team, Roger Schroeder and Susan Goldstein, our esteemed authors. And then at 3:15, we're going to have a career readiness and employability session on supply chain and analytics out of some career readiness faculty directors at the University of Washington. At 4 o'clock, we're going to talk about using digital platforms and adaptive reading in the classroom and practice to teach operations management. And then we'll have a wrap up. So it's going to be a long day. And as I said, you can come and go as you'd like or stay for the whole day. We'd love to have you. All right, so operations and supply chain management. There are challenges in the operations management course, as you know, and we're listening and learning from you. Text and supplement reviews, focus groups, events like these are vital to our development and help us make sure that our content and tools help you and your students. We know that students struggle with study skills and preparedness, as well as connecting the course material to the real world. So our dedicated author and subject matter experts are always working on improving our content to meet those needs and keep materials up to date and as useful as possible. And as I said, we're always listening and we're always learning. So what we're learning, more digital for better operations management seems to be the case. We're seeing digital usage grow and the need for digital content is greater than ever. We're learning from peers and other schools like you will today from this panel. We see the need for more simulations and career-based skills for students, more supply chain and service operations. Supply chain concepts are making the news almost daily because of COVID, which I know everyone has got to be aware of. And we're still learning from the industry. What do they need from the students? What's going to make them successful out of the classroom? So we at McGraw-Hill are a learning science company. So we use research and study the science of how learning happens. We develop methods to make the learning process more effective, and we use data analytics throughout to improve our content, tools, and empower instructors and learners. We build solutions that learners and instructors improve their learning outcomes. And this all works together. So with that said, we are going to move into our panel discussion, and I'm a little ahead of time, which is great because we've got 6 panelists today. So we've got a lot of time to talk through different issues that we're having in the classroom. But welcome our panelists, Khurram Buddha from Ohio University, Kimball Bullington from Middle Tennessee State, Roger Grind from University of New Hampshire, Nicole Coppell from Montclair State University, Tracy Lee from Boise State University, and Lisa Haupt-Spencer from Cal State University, Fresno. So from all over the country, we are excited to have you today. There we go. All right. So panelists, are you ready? Everyone should be on screen and ready to answer some questions. So what I'm gonna do is have the questions pull up on the screen one at a time and have each of you take about 2 minutes, or as long as you would like, to talk through each of the different panelist questions. Again, please note that as panelists are speaking, if you have questions, please enter those in the chat or the Q&A, and we will be, Eric and I will be able to say them out loud to the panelists and communicate on this side so that we can answer them. All right, panelists. So Khurram, you're going to be up first. We're just going to do this alphabetically. So are you teaching operations management, supply chain, or both? Are you teaching in person, hybrid, or online this semester? And what have been the biggest change for your course this year, aside from moving online? Or in some cases, I think people are moving back into the classroom. And have you added any new topics or discussions related to current events this semester? Khurram?
Thank you, Harper. I appreciate that. So I'm Khurram Buddha. I'm a faculty here with the Ohio University College of Business. And yes, I'm actually teaching both operations management and a supply chain logistics type course. The biggest challenge, I guess, that I've had is that we've actually basically been trying to move back in person. So this past year was pretty much virtual. So trying to kind of shift back for myself and my students, that's been the bigger deal there. I also teach a graduate operations management course, which is hybrid, and that has stayed hybrid. It's a Saturday in person, and then we have one night a week where we teach online. In terms of adding new topics or discussions, I think one of the biggest things that I think most of the faculty are doing that, kind of adding, especially in the supply chain part of operations management, as well as the supply chain course, the concept of resilience, the concept of sustainability. And also one of the things that I'm looking forward for spring, for instance, is trying to get in more supply chain analytics into the course.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you, Khurram. And what about you, Kimball?
Hi, Kimball Bullock
Hi.
from Middle Tennessee. We have, I'm actually a course coordinator for 9 sections of supply chain operations, and we're on campus as well as online. I'm not sure we have technically any hybrid, though it seems that way. Our on ground has looked like a hybrid course because we've had so many students with COVID during the semester. So even though we started out with most people there, it didn't stay that way very long. And so essentially you're doing both, even though that wasn't really the intention. A couple of different practices, I guess, this year is we're emphasizing speakers, trying to get speakers to the on campus or via Zoom. If we have them on campus, then we're videoing that, and the other classes have access to that. We're starting out just about every week with a job description. Just go to Indeed.com and we look up and I give them a job description I've already scouted out, and we show the relevance to the particular topic. So it's easy to find job descriptions that talk about forecasting, that talk about inventory management, that talk about Excel skills or Six Sigma. So every week I'm trying to show them relevance to the local job market, and the fact that we have not just jobs in a big sense, but very specific jobs that they could qualify for. And also every week I'm trying to just pull in current events and it just get some of the news and talk about that. So yes, that's where we are right now.
Fantastic, Kimball. Thanks so much for sharing. And what about you, Roger?
Hi, everybody. I'm Roger
Hi.
Grindy, and I'm at the University of New Hampshire in the Decision Sciences Department. There are about 6 or 7 of us that teach. We actually don't call it operations management. We call it quantitative decision making. This class is kind of a blend between operations management and management science, and that decision to blend that goes back a number of years with a curriculum redesign. So in this class, we cover certainly a lot of the core OM topics, but we also try to inject more of a modeling orientation to it. So for example, I have a separate module in modeling and sensitivity analysis and that sort of thing. So my experience has been that students are fine using sort of predefined models, and they can understand that, but they tend to struggle, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, they struggle with actually developing models themselves for situations that are a little bit different. So we try to do a little bit more of that in the class. Similar to others this semester, it's kind of one of coming back into the classroom, although I think we're trying to retain some of the things that we learned going fully remote. I think most of the faculty are giving exams remotely using the online platform, and that is actually going pretty well. Part of that is just due to a number of students being in isolation or quarantine at any given time, and it's just easier that way, frankly. But most faculty are doing that still in a synchronous fashion using our common exam times. I personally teach the class in the summer time frame, which is completely online, asynchronous, a 5-week term. So it's very intense during that time. For the last couple of years, I haven't taught it actually during the school year. We're having another thing that we learned during COVID was it kind of forced us. We've been trying to use guest speakers for a number of semesters live. Of course, COVID taught us that we can't do that, but that's had the benefit of it's actually easier to get guest speakers. And so we have them, and we have all 7 or 8 sections in a semester being able to participate, as opposed to just having it kind of as an extra credit kind of thing. So that's actually been a nice thing that we've been able to retain from what we learned in COVID. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Roger Grindy. And for all the years I've known you, I did not realize that's how you pronounced your name. So I apologize for that mess up there. Okay, so Nicole, how about you? Did you are you prepared to answer some of these questions?
Hi, You hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Nice to meet everybody. Welcome. My name is Nicole Coppell. I'm a faculty member at Montclair State University. I've been there for over 2 decades at this point. We're in northern New Jersey. We're the second largest state university after the Rutgers system. I've been teaching operations management, supply chain in many different modalities, in many different fashions over the years. Last year during COVID, I obviously was pre-scheduled to teach in-person classes, and those turned into be what we call our synchronous online version of online. But this semester, I made a conscious effort and I chose to teach a fully asynchronous online course. So it sort of, even at a time when everyone was predicting back in April, May that we would be sort of unmasked and sitting in classrooms, sort of back to normal, I did elect to do a asynchronous. And part of our thinking there had been that that now that the students have been exposed to online and learning from home, they're going to be more willing and even eager in some cases to take some of their classes in a fully online format. We have about 13 or 14 sections of the course, and maybe 1 or 2 of them are fully asynchronous. So something that we did interesting this year is, as we were all developing asynchronous classes, every time we kept realizing that a lot of the faculty members who teach us are reinventing the wheel. We're all creating our own set of lectures and recordings and different styles. And we decided to take an approach where we teamed up and did a divide and conquer, where we could develop a asynchronous online class that one of many people, including possibly adjuncts that pop in, could eventually be able to teach. And because our operations supply chain class is very, a survey course, in terms of that we teach a lot of different topics, we really divided and conquered, and each of us developed like 3 or 4 what we'll call modules and topics to develop the lecture, help choose, which homework problems to use in Connect, or which type of problems to use in Connect for practice. And, and then, and we kind of developed that in advance, so different professors could really use the same shell of the course. And then where our added value, besides obviously office hours, Zoom office hours, and we create relevant discussions each term, with a little bit more ripped from the headlines, so the students could really appreciate the operations and supply chain in real time. So that's all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nicole. This is great. Tracy, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tracy Lee, and I'm with Boise State University. I'm also the course coordinator, and we have 5 or 6 sections of Principles of Supply Chain Management that we teach every semester. We offer it in every modality currently, right? Last year it was mostly online, but I have been teaching it asynchronous online for some time. I would say maybe 2 years at this point. Prior to that, we really only had 1 or 2 sections a year of online asynchronous at Boise State, but there was enough demand for it from students before the pandemic started that we added additional sections. We have it's not a commuter school, but we do have a higher percentage of working adults who are in our full-time programs, and so we're trying to respond to the needs of our students by offering more online options. I've taught online since 2007, and so I already had a fully developed course when the pandemic started. And how have I responded to the changes over time? As many people have mentioned, I've incorporated more current events because there are lots more current events to offer that come at us fast and furious all the time. So my discussion boards have changed to be more student focused and personal experience focused. For example, this semester I added one called Your Supply Chain, where I asked them to, and I'm using more of what Gen Z finds more appealing: memes, GIFs, videos that they're recording. So I asked them to explain a part of a supply chain that they're part of, in which they are the supplier, they add value, and they send a product along the channel. So we have a lot of entrepreneurial people out there now. We had students talk about selling clothes once they're tired of them, or buying sneakers from China and then reselling them to people in the US. Or people talked about their family businesses, supply chain. There are many people who were much more informed than I've ever seen in the past about supply chain, which I learned from reading and seeing and watching their responses. I incorporate simulation into the class through the practice operations, and I've responded to student feedback about they want to have it more all together instead of breaking the modules apart. And so one of the biggest changes this semester is I'm offering a module at the end of the semester where it's going to be all practice, all week, all reflection, and give them a break from the traditional watch videos, do homework, watch smart, or read, do smart book routine. That you wind up with a routine in an online class so that students know what to expect. So breaking it up at the end when they're fatigued is, I think, going to be exciting for them and for me. So I would say those are, oh, and in terms of, we call it principles of supply chain management, but I would say it's with a healthy dose of operations, and a lot of focus on supply chain in terms of what happens with suppliers, purchasing, warehouse, and logistics.
Love it. Thank you, Tracy. I love the your supply chain. That's fantastic. So Lisa, how about you?
Thank you. My name is Lisa Spencer, and I teach in the Craig School of Business at Cal State Fresno. I'm the course coordinator there, and in the past, we would have 9 or 10 sections of operations management every semester. About a year or so ago, 2 years ago maybe, we started having a really large section instead. So I think we've got about maybe 6 sections now. We have all the modalities. We have fully online. I'm teaching completely face-to-face for all my sections, other than just a couple of pre-recorded lectures here and there. And then we also have the high flex, which is a little different from some of the hybrids in that the students have the option of either attending in class or from home, but it is conducted synchronously. So I think the biggest change for me coming back has just been planning with so much versatility in mind, because we're face to face, but we really have no idea how long that's going to last. But fortunately, and maybe in contrast to what was mentioned earlier, our university has been doing quite well, and the students have been doing a really good job of maintaining the protocols for COVID and not coming if they're ill. And so we've actually had not that many cases, although there are more absences than usual, but the students have been doing quite well and as far as that goes. But with the versatility in mind, I have taken some of the materials that I started using during the pandemic with Connect, which was a lifesaver for the testing platform, but I've incorporated some homework problems for each chapter. And I know a lot of people are probably doing that in the past, but in the past, I wasn't using the Connect platform prior to the pandemic. And then I'm finding that I think it is helping the students to pace themselves a little bit more, having that online graded homework. And I also think it's just really important because we needed them to purchase those materials in case we have to pivot online. And this way they're familiar with it and also gaining value from it, even if we don't, because all our testing is face-to-face now, but this has really given us a lot of flexibility. So very grateful for that resource. And as far as topics, just one last quick thing, I would just agree with what everybody said, and just also looking at the impact that supply chain has had on lean operations and the way that companies are really rethinking that as a result of what's going on, and how so many companies are holding so much more inventory and other things, just to acquiring their own means of transportation and other things like that because of all of the issues that they're facing.
Thanks, Lisa. This is really interesting, and I love the sort of the similarities, but also the differences from everyone. So it's great to see that. I'm going to pull up the next question, which focuses on keeping students engaged and connected with course materials. The following question is, about struggling, what students struggle with. And also there's a question on analytics. And I've already received a couple of questions from attendees about the difference between supply chain analytics and business analytics, and if there is one. So I think I'm going to enter both of those questions now, since we have another about 35 minutes. So feel free to, as you go through, answer whichever ones are most relevant for you. So let me pull up those next questions. So this one was, have you found any best practices for keeping students engaged and connected to their course materials in operations supply chain management? And then the last one is, where do your students seem to struggle most in these courses? Do you see this course changing in the future? How has your course specifically changed at all? And then have you or other faculty in your department added analytics to your course or curriculum? And if so, in what way has it been added? And I know that Roger and I believe Nicole or Kimball mentioned analytics. So if anyone also wants to sort of answer that question from one of our attendees, which was, what is the difference between supply chain analytics versus business analytics, or are they the same thing? So sorry to throw 1 million questions at you guys all at the same time, but Khurram, do you want to take a stab?
I'll try to answer at least some of them. I think several of the participants have already discussed this issue. The issue of adding in simulations, the issue of kind of keeping this generation involved with the class by using, more relevant media as opposed to just writing papers. So VoiceThread, for example, or creating short videos of, just talk about this topic instead of write about this topic. That type of interaction with them. Another thing that I've been doing, and of course I use the McGraw-Hill practice throughout my course, but the other thing that I'm doing is I'm also adding in some other simulations. The feedback that I was getting from students is that, if we can do more hands-on type stuff, that would be better. So I'm using, for example, Howard Business's global supply chain game. I've tried out the Littlefields simulations as well. So the idea of just lecturing is getting a little boring for my students, I guess. And so what I do is I'll either do a 10-15 minute introduction. I think Kimball previously said that, or I might be mistaken, Roger, one of them, they talked about you kind of giving in the job relevance information. So I'll just, I don't kind of go as detailed as going into Indeed and getting a job description, but I'll just kind of talk about, hey, this company in our locality, this is what they do. These are the type of jobs that they are looking for, and here's the relevance to this particular topic. So some of that kind of keeps students engaged. I also use OM News, so kind of pull little short snippets from there and share that with students and try to get a conversation going. The other thing about analytics, in our school, we actually have a business analytics course, and so they kind of do some of the pre-analytics for us, pivot tables and all that fun stuff, big data incorporation. And what we do in the ops courses are more kind of the specific tools. So for example, linear programming or the transportation model or decision theory, just, where those tools are relevant to decision making in operations. So that's kind of where we are. And lastly, about supply chain analytics, we are just now getting into that conversation, with my colleagues. And again, I'm the coordinator here for operations management, so I've just been trying to pick their brains on, what they see, what is relevant, what we might be able to include.
And Khurram, does that differ from maybe an existing business analytics course on campus, or is that in place of? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, that's the conversation we're having right now. But yes, I mean, the consensus is definitely, because the idea really with supply chain analytics will be to focus on those aspects of analytics that are relevant to supply chain. And in our school, something that happened several years ago, we used to have like a business stat class, and they dropped that for business analytics.
Okay.
And the business analytics class is more kind of stats / analytics at this point. And even with a 14, 15-week semester, they really can't cover everything. So the supply chain analytics will be focused, just on the supply chain aspects.
Got it. Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Kimball, how about you?
We have a business analytics department. We work very closely with them, and even supply them with data. So we have good connections in our supply chain group with industry, and so we've gotten industry data, large data sets, to supply to our analytics group. So we're in very good terms. From our perspective, they go deeper than we do, and certainly in our beginning course, our introduction course, supply chain operations, we are doing some very basic analytics in Excel. One of the struggles that we have is just continuing to get students to think in terms of real problems rather than this is a class. This is an assignment, and so and get them to actually analyze the data that's in front of them. We teach them the tool, but getting them to actually translate that and interpret the data is obviously stretching them in this course.
Very true. I've heard that over and over again. So thank you for sharing. What about you, Roger?
Yes, I think I'm on the wrong panel in terms of how do I engage students, but I will brag on some of my colleagues, I think. In my particular course, the 5-week course, I mean, I do the current event things. I do short simulations. The challenge there is it's asynchronous, and I think a lot of the richness there comes out if you're in an interactive environment, so that students can ask questions right then and there. One of my colleagues is he's really good at creating relatively short, I guess you could call them simulations, but they're really exercises in class. I mean, I like the comprehensive simulations, but these are more focused on, a lot of them get students out of their seat, for a putting game where they're plotting the distance from the target and that sort of thing. So to collect data for a control chart or what have you, or an inventory simulation or supply chain kind of thing. Sort of, they may not take the whole period. They may, in fact, it's best if they don't. They take 20 or 30 minutes at the most. And so he's developed 4 or 5 of those in different modules of the course, and so he's very good about sharing those. I have not. I've used those when I teach face to face, but not so much in the asynchronous environment. We've also tried to take some of the existing textbook cases, which tend to be pretty focused, and try to, and well, our ulterior motive here was that we were finding that students could find either solutions online or presentations that other students from other universities had done on this particular case for their class. And so we kind of called the students' bluff a little bit and started extending the data sets and maybe enhancing them a little bit, and developing some additional questions, still keeping the kind of the the context for the case, but just giving it a little bit more maybe real world emphasis. And I guess that's one area where it'd be great to. The other thing, we're just barely starting this as a department, but I see it as a really potential thing for this class, is we're starting to develop more of a library of data sets. And part of this, what really is, we should have been doing this for years, but what really is kind of motivating us to do this is more of an increased emphasis on DEI initiatives around the campus and within our college, and really trying to identify data sets that that are not all about white men kind of thing, but that we can use within our quantitative fields, which me naively, I don't immediately think of DEI when I'm teaching linear programming, that sort of thing. So that's another thing that we're just barely starting to do. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Roger. And Nicole, how about you?
So I'm going to talk first a little bit about the best practices, and something we do maybe a little different than some of you. We have and we call it our integrated course. So in the one semester we require our students to take, and it doesn't, again, regardless of modality, whatever section they take, but they take marketing, they take their operations class, they take management, and they take finance, all within the same term. And what we do is we use it started out with an integrated case study, but it really is an integrated company that we have the students analyze, because again, back to sort of thinking in terms of silos, if each of those areas you're kind of learning just about those specific areas, you really sometimes don't understand the big picture of an organization. So over the years, we've done different things, from like Whole Food Market, Southwest Airlines, we've done Starbucks, and currently we're doing the Disney company, and we engage it for all our students across all of the business disciplines that I mentioned, and then we incorporate it into the courses. So, again, and thanks to the team that you guys put together to get the OM in the news, and we're able to, a lot of times, while we don't only talk about the company itself, but a lot of the discussions, a lot of like the rip from the headline things, we try to bring right into the discussion related to the case, as it is happening kind of in real time. So it does make it, really interesting. And again, if we're teaching about forecasting, we might say, go out and find, actual real data or financial data about, something related to the company. In this case, maybe Disney, or could have been some, it could have been the passengers in Southwest Airlines, and they use that as the real data they're using to perform different levels of, forecasting and different models they might use for their data and things like that. So I think that's an interesting approach to how one of the ways we are able to keep our students engaged. Just to address a couple other points you made, we also have converted our traditional business stats course to include more components of analytics in there. And then we just, but still, like many areas, we still do focus a lot on modeling, but we are looking for ways to do a little bit more of, of data-driven type of analytics in the classes. And I answered all the questions. I think that's, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. And Tracy, how about you?
Let me start by talking about business analytics versus supply chain analytics. So at Boise State, we have a 2-course sequence in business analytics that all business majors are required to take. The first one is a traditional introduction to statistics that we call Intro to Business Analytics. And they're learning descriptive statistics. They're learning what's the normal distribution, binomial, et cetera. And we finish up with, hypothesis testing. In the second semester, we call it business analytics, but we haven't really made the full switch to being business analytics. It is really an advanced statistics course where they're learning ANOVA and regression, which of course those are also analytics techniques. But so all students have that. And we also have a supply chain analytics course for our supply chain majors and so the difference there is that they're using some of those techniques that they would have learned in their analytics class, the general one, and applying it in supply chain, large data sets to look at transportation modeling or to look at inventory management modeling. And we also have a similar course in our MBA programs on analytics and one that is where they take an analytics course and then later on they take a supply chain course and incorporate those techniques. So that's how we would consider the difference between them. One is the applied to supply chain using techniques that you've already learned, and the other is a more general approach. Then in terms of how we keep them engaged, actually, I think having that supply chain analytics course, of course, helps to keep the the majors engaged. In terms of just in general, in the introductory course, the principles class, I've found the more I give students a voice, the more I give them choice, the more engaged they are. Just to talk about the asynchronous online class I teach, I've spent a lot of time figuring out the best way to lecture, because there isn't actually a good way to lecture. Students don't want lecture, but I record lecture videos that are 10 minutes or less, and I embed quiz questions in them. We're using the Panopto platform. There's lots of ways to do this, though. And so the videos stop every couple of minutes, ask them a question that assesses their understanding. And that is a form of engagement that they're just not passively listening. Then I also try to use discussion board topics that are very much about their lived experience. And I've tried to replace all of my rote, write an essay and respond to 3 peers type things with ones that pull on their experience to make it relevant rather. I also send an email because again, this is asynchronous, so I don't have the engagement with them in the classroom. I email them twice a week, and I always try to include either a funny YouTube video that is related to supply chain, a problem ripped from the headlines, as Nicole has said, but that's kind of a funny video, or something that's right now related to the topic that we're covering. OM in the news has been, a good source of not just topics, but also questions. The discussion questions, the prompts that are included are really thought-provoking. And I would say in terms of struggle, like where do we have the most struggle in the class? Despite our emphasis on analytics and despite our emphasis on quantitatives, I think that is still an area that students struggle with a lot, is just a general sense of intimidation about math. So, if they see a Greek symbol, it's like the brain short circuits. And so this semester, I've added in for the first time review quizzes and a review session before each test where there was a heavy quantitative component, because our class is considered one of the most intimidating to students, supply chain. Even though, my gosh, we use variables that the letter actually represents that thing, C for cost, H for holding. But unlike in statistics where you're like, sigma, what's that? Okay, so that's my little side tangent there. And so I actually found that students have done better on the most recent exam because I added a review quiz and a review session. We recorded it. They came in, they asked questions. So it's really practice, more and more practice, and getting them to be comfortable with it, I think, has been how I'm addressing the struggle. And I think every faculty has to find the way that works best in the modality they're teaching and the culture of their classroom. But I don't know, do other people have different areas of struggle? That's the biggest one I continue to face.
Thanks, Tracy. I loved the comment about adding comedy into the equation, or, kind of funny videos, because I know that's definitely engaging for students. Lisa, how about you?
Thank you. I've been watching students take this class now for over 30. I'm in my 31st year of teaching, and I'm seeing something different this semester with my face-to-face classes that I really haven't seen in the past. And it's something that I've also heard talked about at elementary and, earlier education levels. But I think that, so the class that I teach, it's our only operations class, and it's also a basic survey class. It's heavily quantitative though, and it's viewed as one of the most challenging classes in the business school just because of the way the curriculum's designed. As Tracy was also mentioning, I have similar perceptions of the class as people come in. But I think this last year plus, where students spent their junior year taking classes online, has really changed sort of their way of learning and their expectations. And I'm just noticing that something's been lost in the mix, something that has to do with, of course, online classes can be extremely rigorous, but something that has to do with the rigor of being in class every day, being completely engaged. You cannot get up, leave, go do something else and come back, take little breaks whenever you want, or just really having to do the memorization that's involved with taking a face-to-face test versus a test online, maybe where you can rely on notes and books and other things. And so I'm just seeing a period of readjustment for students as they're re-entering this world of face-to-face learning. And in all honesty, to me, that's been the biggest difference as the students are returning, is just that not having had that junior year of face-to-face has left them a little bit less prepared, I think, to step into an extremely rigorous face-to-face class. So, just really encouraging them and trying to help them and support them and tell them what they need to be doing. And after the first test, they realize more seriously what I'm talking about and why these things are so important. But one of my students commented to me that he's found it more difficult to engage with other students, because I think a lot of people have learned to sort of learn in isolation, do their own thing. And as they're coming back on campus, maybe they're not perceiving the need to connect with other students as much as they used to. So I don't know if anybody else is experiencing that, but for me, that's been the biggest difference that I've seen coming back. As far as best practices and things, first of all, thank you, Tracy, for all that you do as editor of OM in the News, because that's a phenomenal resource. I always put together a lot of articles, probably about 10 or 11 different packets of articles, maybe 6 pages or so long each semester, for my students on all the different current topics that I want to cover with them. And they're fresh each semester based on what's going on. And the students are required to read and study those before class. We have a very short, quick oral quiz where I ask them questions orally and they write answers when they come in, so that they have prepared that material and they've studied it and they know the facts now in their head, hopefully. And then during the class period, they'll work with each other in small groups to write answers to case questions, which we then discuss together afterwards. And I try very hard to keep them engaged then with current events and things that are going on. And as part of that, we also, a few of the readings are based on case studies that I've written, and I try to focus on local businesses, so that I have a number of different local companies that I've profiled over the years, and will, for instance, study one of them fairly early on. It's called the Brownie Baker. It's a local bakery, a fairly good sized local bakery that has distribution across the United States. And we study it initially, but then I return to it over and over again as an integrated course, case analysis throughout the semester to tell them, as we look at other topics, what the Brownie Baker is doing in that area. So that's been a tool that helps them to have continuity, I think. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of us this semester that teach in our business school have been asked to participate in an equity and inclusivity online learning program. And as part of that, it's really made me think about how most of our students, a lot of our students are first generation. And to try to help them overcome the intimidation that they feel either with the quantitative aspects of the class or being able to envision themselves as being operations managers. This idea that I'm going to share just only came to me about a week ago, so I haven't implemented it yet, but this is something that I want to do, which is to create a PowerPoint presentation with maybe a dozen or so slides of some of our alums that have graduated from the business school and that have actually gone into operations, because we don't have an operations option, but we have a lot of people that recruit operations positions from our course. And what I want to be able to show them is a diverse array of people who have graduated and moved into operations, so that early on in the course, they can see themselves in that. They can see somebody that sounds like they come from their background, or that looks like them, or that in other ways that they can really connect with and see, gosh, that's something I could do. And I really could do that, even though maybe I felt like math hasn't been my strong point, or I've never even really realized what operations management is, but I see in myself something like what I see in them, and maybe I could do that too. That's all. Thank you.
I absolutely love that, that whole concept of equity and inclusion, and what a great idea. That's fantastic. The next 7 minutes or so, I'm wondering if there are any questions that you all have for each other based on what you've heard so far, or if there's any, because I feel like, you know, you're all sort of talking in silos, but if please chime in if anyone's got any questions for anyone else on the panel that you may have heard that you liked what they're doing and want to hear more about. Just curious if there was anything. Just going to kind of put it out there, so whoever wants to.
Sorry, I actually wanted to ask Tracy a little bit more about when you first talked about asking your students what they do in the supply chain. I know in the past, I always sort of said to my students that, you know, find a new, you know, like a recent relevant implementation of supply chain. And I just feel like I'm getting, you know, like, you know, weak summaries of articles they barely understand. But I love the idea of what you said. Can you talk a little bit more about, like, you know, like how you present it and what you have them do?
Oh, yeah. Me talk? Never. So I have done the same thing in the past where I have said, go find, in fact, that's their first discussion, is find an article about something you're interested in that's happening related to supply chain, to a product you use. And you get the 70% of the class finds the same article kind of a thing. I don't know how that happens. So this time I thought, okay, I'm going to add in now that they've
And
had
all on
that
Amazon, by the way.
Yeah, right.
All on Amazon, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought, all right, after they've had the OM in the news, the supply chain in the news discussion board, now I'm going to say it's your turn. And so I said, we are all part of supply chains. And here is an example of a supply chain that we all use. Here's toilet paper, right? So I just said logging companies and chemical companies provide timber and chemicals. And so I gave them an example of the pieces of a supply chain for toilet paper, you know, that we all have used the product, and then said, for this activity, consider a supply chain where you're one of the suppliers. You buy something, you add value, you sell it. And then I gave them examples. You might be part of a supply chain through the company where you work. So you could choose any of the supply chains your company is part of. I want them to see the relevance of what we're talking about in class to their company, and also that makes them a more valuable employee. It makes their bosses see them in a different light when they start using terminology at work and asking questions. Or I say you can focus on a supply chain that a volunteer organization you're is part of, or you're running a side hustle, or you're a supplier to a customer, or you're reselling something and passing it along, and describe it. You can use a diagram that you draw by hand and upload as a picture. You can build a PowerPoint, a Visio. You can record a video. You can do this in any way that you want to. I have a graduate assistant who's helping me this semester because I ended up teaching on overload and I have hundreds of students. And he was so excited to read their discussion boards. I don't think I've seen such excitement from a student. He's like, this was so fun to read. And he gave me some of his favorites from the class. So we have a student who's in health informatics at our St. Luke's Hospital who provided a list of the steps that they go through in audits and review. He gave me PowerPoint links from Google Slides and et cetera. And he was just super excited about how interesting it was to learn from students. And I thought, you know, this is something I need to learn from, that his excitement, right? We need to do more of this, having students teach one another, having students be the center stage.
Yeah,
So,
no,
yeah.
That's great. A great example of engagement.
They surprised me with their sophistication. And I don't know if that's just because of the pandemic, right? That it's so much more in the news. It is so much more, everyone is so much more aware of supply chain now that you hear it constantly.
Right.
And if you live in California, all the right, the ports, all the ships off the coast, of course, the shelves are bare in stores, and students, everyone knows that it might be because your stuff is on a boat off the coast, or they can't get containers. I mean, who ever thought of shipping containers before this?
There's nobody now who doesn't know what supply chain is, which is
Right.
I don't even think we could have said that, you know, a year and a half ago, but now it's just a common term in everyone's vocabulary.
Your course has been elevated to superior status. There was one other question in the chat around, I don't know that I completely understood, but it was around data sets, and I think specific probably to Roger, you mentioned getting data sets from various students around campus. Can you sort of...
Yeah, not necessarily from students, but this is just more of a department trying to, I think someone had mentioned the idea of creating video sets that, you know, they farm out the creation of videos for their asynchronous course. This is kind of the same idea, except for data sets. We're always trying to find good data sets to use. So we're just trying to, as a department, we're just trying to be a little bit more integrative with one another, as opposed to each working in their own little bubble. And really what has triggered this, or triggered our motivation for doing this, is the renewed, or perhaps new, depending on your point of view, emphasis on DEI across the universities and within the college. So, you know, so that we're not simply reusing 15-year-old, 20-year-old data sets, but we're actively on the lookout for data sets that are supportive of DEI. We don't necessarily view it as our job is to teach that, but we certainly want to be supportive of it, and you know, show that these fields indeed are that, you know, globally and within the country and all that kind of stuff. So that's just kind of a rambling answer. We're barely getting started on it. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. So that I love hearing about the diversity, equity, inclusion. I think it's a fantastic. It's something that McGraw-Hill is very invested in as well. So great to hear that.